Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Rebecca Green, a divorce real estate specialist. And as you know, I'm making my way through Kansas City interviewing some of the most influential divorce specialists in their line of work. And today I've got Melissa. Do you mind to introduce yourself to everybody?
Hi, I'm Melissa Ellis. I own Sapphire Divorce Solutions. I'm a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. What I do is I just try to make divorce easy when it comes to the dollars and cents of it. Let's just figure out the money and everything else seems to fall into place.
One of the coolest conversations that Melissa and I had off camera a little bit earlier was her unique perspective on collaborative divorce. I think that would be a really good place to start with this conversation. Can you explain what is collaborative divorce?
Yeah. So collaborative divorce is a practice around divorce where there's an attorney for each party.
Okay.
And then there's a mental health therapist to help everyone, including the professionals involved.
Sure.
And they also usually do the parenting plan as well, if there's a parenting plan. And then there's a financial neutral, which is always a certified divorce financial analyst. And that's the role that I play. So that team of professionals helps a couple get divorced. And so they don't have to go through a trial. And everyone is like-minded in that we want it to be more of a mediation type setting, which is kind of like mediation on steroids, really, because you have all the information that you need. Everyone has the financial information up front. And then whenever we get into what we call a six-way meeting with the four professionals and the couple, then we can just start working through what all the issues are and figure out how to divide everything. And it usually comes out very easy. It's not adversarial, and it just makes it so that we can preserve the family, keep them as a family. They might not be married, but they're still going to be a family if they have kids. Whether their kids are small or grown,
right?
They're still a family.
Right. And that's one thing that I experience in my line of work a lot is people, at the beginning, they're like, hey, we know we need to sell the house and everybody's good up front. And then they make it to mediation or they each get an attorney and all of a sudden things aren't good anymore. In your experience, what type of a client can really benefit from this type of help?
So if they're amicable and able to have a conversation, put it that way, that they haven't frozen each other out, they're not trying to hide anything, because whether you go through mediation or the collaborative process, you have to be open and honest, because if you're not, then it's all going to come out eventually. You might as well just be upfront and honest at the very beginning, saying these are the accounts that that we have. Oh, and by the way, I did open up this separate bank account over here that you didn't know about last year. You have to be open and be able to share all that information. If you're not, it's just going to come back and bite you later. And if you're in the collaborative process, it can make the whole process end immediately because you aren't being open and nobody trusts you at that point. And if you end a collaborative process, you have to start all over. You can't use any of the professionals that were involved. You're not supposed to use any of the information that was already collected. You have to start from scratch, which becomes very expensive because you've already paid money. Open, honest people that are able to communicate, even if they don't want to talk directly to each other, if they can communicate through, whether it's the certified divorce financial analyst or through their attorney, then that's great. As long as we have an open line of communication, it'll work.
Right. So you said in the beginning that you work really closely with attorneys and there's a therapist involved, whether it's inside a collaborative process or just outside. Can you explain that a little bit?
Initially, I'll collect all the documents that we need for all the finances. So whatever the financial accounts are, bank statements, credit card statements, investment statements, 401k statements, employee contracts, if there are contracts, if somebody, maybe a professional has a contract with their employer, anything and everything, a deed to the house, titles on the cars, all of that information.
You able to collect that?
So usually with the help of the client. And sometimes there are things that they don't know how to get or they're not able to get. So some of that information we can get through either the county, like information about property, the legal description, all that we can get through the county. And I'll help them out if we can. But I always give them a list and tell them where they can usually obtain the information. And most of it's pretty easy. Every once in a while we run into something where, we have to get something from way back when.
Right.
And there is a process to do that, but we'll just guide them through it as we go.
So then you collect all the information and then what happens?
I enter that into software that is specifically for divorce.
Okay.
And so we first print out a spreadsheet that shows all the assets and liabilities of the relationship. Not assigned to anyone, it's just the list. And that is actually one of the documents that has to go to the court so that whenever the divorce is filed, that's something that gets uploaded into the court system. And then after that, we always do an income and expense report with each person as what their finances will look like once they're divorced. So that is usually the unknown. And everyone's like, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know. No, we'll go with the best information we have. And it's like, we just start peeling back the onion, find out, do you think you'll buy another house or do you think you'll rent an apartment? Is one of the people going to stay in the marital home? Sometimes that happens. I've had couples before where they did what's called nesting, where the kids stay in the house and the parents pop back and forth week by week. And then they go stay somewhere else on the week that they're not with the kids.
I see that. Yeah.
But it is a cool concept.
I think I've seen that on some social media where it's like, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have worked for me personally, but that's great.
It doesn't work for everybody, but in some cases that works out well. And it usually works out well until there's somebody else, until they couple up with somebody else.
Get you.
Yeah, then that other person doesn't always understand why you're going back and living in that other house, but that's okay. But there are pretty much, if you can think of a creative way to settle your divorce, if you're in the collaborative process or mediation, we can usually find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, that's, to me, just one of the most valuable assets that so many people don't know is even out there. They think they've got to get the best attorney, even if it's an amicable divorce. I've experienced friends recently who are like, he's being okay now, but what if? And so people just lawyer up and it gets expensive. Do you mind to talk a little bit about the expense associated with the collaborative process?
Yeah, absolutely. So up front, you'll pay a retainer to each of the professionals. And altogether, I'll just give you the total number. Altogether, it's $11,000 for those retainers. And that, for the most part, usually gets people through the divorce process. Sometimes it might go a little bit over, just depending on how quickly and easily we can come to settlement. So you're looking at, $11,000. Worst case, I would say maybe might go over $3,000 or $4,000 more than that sometimes, but still less than if you went to trial.
Such an asset. It really is. And then as far as time frame goes, like I said, most divorces I've seen recently where you both get attorneys, 8 months is fast.
Oh, yeah.
By the time you get through the whole process. What's the collaboration process?
Yeah, collaborative, depending on how quickly we can get all 6 people scheduled at the same time. Usually, there's a 2-month waiting period in most counties in this area.
Okay.
So you have that. But it's usually, I'd say 3 to 4 months and we're finished. Wow. I mean, beginning to end, we can be done in that time frame. Then others maybe went slightly longer, but I don't think I've had any that went more than 5 months.
That's great.
Yeah.
So your designation as a certified financial planner, it seems like that's one of the biggest missing links that I see in divorces. People just think, well, I'll let my accountant handle it or my tax guy will handle it once we're divorced. Share a little bit about why you believe that might not be the best case forward.
Yeah. And so CPAs are great. They prepare your taxes and they have that information, but they're not trained in anything about divorce. And there are so many loopholes, maybe sometimes that could be a pitfall too, that you don't want to step into. But there's some advantages that you have financially too when you're getting divorced. And as a real estate agent, you're probably aware that a lot of people are able to assume the mortgage from their spouse. That is a big one right there, because especially when right now the interest rates are higher than, people have 2.5% mortgages and I don't want to give that up. Well, you might not have to. And a lot of times you can't afford to rent cheaper than what that house payment is. So that's a huge advantage. And there are other things that are like that come about that your CPA is not going to know. Maybe even your financial advisor that you've been working with, they don't know because they haven't been trained in divorce. And not only do I have the designation for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, but also I've taken multiple trainings since I got that designation 7 or 8 years ago. That additional training has been just a huge help.
I bet.
Yeah, a lot of different things can happen.
You literally learn something new every single family that I help. You're like, well, that was a different way to look at it. That shook out differently than I thought it might. I just wish I could get inside your brain. What are 3 or 4 things that people always seem surprised about whenever you talk with them?
A lot of times, they're surprised that it can be as calm. And a lot of people just said they really thought we would get into the meetings and it would be just tense. It's not at all the way it is. It's really more, the attorneys even are usually just very respectful of one another. It's just leading a conversation. And a lot of times the therapist is the one that will lead the conversation just because they can kind of gauge how everyone's feeling just by body language. And they know that, okay, we need to take a break. Somebody is getting stressed out or they're getting that glazed over look, and they'll say, how about let's take a 5-minute break? And we get up, but we can do that at any point in time. I think that's the biggest thing that most people don't realize. It's going to be just more of a conversation. Other things that people don't realize is that it can be done pretty quickly and relatively speaking compared to a trial, for example. I've spoken to people that thought about going through a mediation or collaborative, and then they ended up going the trial route. And it's a year later and they're calling and asking me questions. They still haven't gotten a trial date. That's just a lot of extra stress that nobody needs to go through.
Absolutely. Could I, as a client, bring any attorney that I wanted into the collaborative process?
No.
Okay, what's that like?
Yeah, all the professionals that do the collaborative work, and there's a group of us in Kansas City. It's Collaborative Practice of Kansas City. You can find us online and you'll see all the professionals there that have been trained in it. It's a disciplined process. That there is a process that we follow. It's not just, let's just make it up as we go. No, all the attorneys have been trained in that. All the financial neutrals have been trained in that, and all the therapists have been trained in that. So it is a practice that if you went to another state, they do this a lot in California, they do a lot in Arizona. If you go to those states, you'll find that they're doing the same process.
Okay, you used a phrase that I want to go back to, a financial neutral.
Yes.
And what I want to highlight, and I'd love for you to speak more in depth about it, is sometimes people get through the divorce process and they're all riled up about, well, so-and-so just wanted to take all my money and I paid $500 for every email. But then on the backside of it, you maybe have seen sometimes divorce professionals don't have a client's best interest. Is that what that phrase means?
Yeah, so the financial neutral, that's truly, I'm neutral for the couple. So I'm helping both of them. So I'm not favoring one or the other. It's just, let's just help you both get to an agreement that makes financial sense for both of you. And they can see not only what it's going to look like the day that they get divorced, but what does it look like 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that, their net worth is not going to suffer. You don't want to see one that their net worth is going to grow and the other one's going to tumble like within a couple of years.
Right.
And then, that's not a good settlement. We look at, before tax and after tax. If tax is implicated in it, then we want to, make sure that, that's accounted for.
Okay, talk about that, the before tax and the after tax, because in my experience, especially being an entrepreneur and having my own real estate business, I could have very easily made it look like on my taxes, I didn't make a lot of money because we can write so much off. And then the person that I divorced would have maybe owed a lot of child support or even some alimony. Right. So is that something that you take into account to help both parties make sure we're being honest?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're a business owner or you're self-employed in any way, what it says on your taxes a lot of times doesn't take into account, especially, well, what if you're a landlord?
Right.
You have depreciation on all that real estate property, right? So that's not real solid dollars right now. That's not a true deduction from your income. You really had more money coming in. Your cash flow is not exactly the same as what your income taxes are. So when we calculate income for support, that is different than income for tax purposes. I'm not saying that anyone's doing anything illegal on the taxes. No, it's perfectly legal to do it that way. But we want to see really what's the cash flow. That's the more important piece of that, is what's the true amount of cash coming into each household and what are the expenses to run each household. And we don't want phantom income or phantom expenses to affect it one way or the other. So you can't just look at the tax return. We really have to look at what's the true cash coming into the household.
So a really simple question that I get asked all the time, or it's something that gets brought up, especially in the beginning, is one spouse feels like, well, I'm not going to have anything to start over. I've stayed home, or maybe I just have a smaller job so I can take care of the kids while my spouse is off working, and people feel really scared. As someone who specializes in this, can you maybe put some of those fears to rest?
A lot of times people think, oh, all the retirement is in, say the husband's name. Well, I shouldn't say that. The highest breadwinner.
Sure.
I've had stay-at-home dads before. Just because it was saved in that person's name, if it was saved as marital income, that's marital assets. A lot of people don't realize that. It doesn't matter what the name is. If you made a decision as a family that this person's going to go to work and this is what we're going to save to the 401k, that if you get divorced, it doesn't mean that the person who didn't work outside the home doesn't have anything. Everything that's marital is both of theirs and needs to be divided equitably. In Kansas, we have equitable divorce, same in Missouri. It's an equitable distribution property state. So, meaning it doesn't necessarily have to be 50-50 either. Equitable is what is fair and what will help each of them be successful going down the road.
Okay, so in an example, if I understand that correctly, let's say I make twice what my spouse makes. When we're dividing our assets and we have a large sum of retirement, we might give him more because I'll still have the capability to make more in the future.
Right.
Is that right?
Absolutely. And there have been cases too where I've had a spouse say, and it was in a mediation process, he had spent money outside the marriage.
Okay.
On something else that was not a part of their marriage that she didn't know anything about. So that came to light, and he said, nope, she needs to be made equal or whole so that her retirement isn't going to be affected. And they were older. They were in their late 60s at the time of their divorce. So she ended up with more of the assets than he did, simply because he had chosen to spend money on things that he should not have spent on.
Is that something you see happen often in the collaborative process where people are like, okay,
that's not real. That doesn't happen a lot. If it does, I mean, that's where in the collaborative process, that's where it would come out and we can say, okay, let's make this so that it's going to be okay for the person that's not making the higher income, or maybe has never made any income at all. Right. I've also seen cases where we had a stay-at-home parent and they haven't been in the workforce maybe ever, or they might have a college degree, but they haven't ever used those skills. They might need more certification or training, or maybe even another degree to be able to go out and replace that type of thing or the income at that level. And I've seen where, the working spouse said, hey, no, I'll pay for their education. Something like that can happen in the collaborative process. So
a lot more likely to happen there as opposed to attorneys fighting.
Right. Because everyone can see, look, this person is going to be better off in the long run, because you have to have a plan. Eventually that support runs out, right? Either the kids grow up, or if you're getting spousal maintenance, that ends after, well, in Kansas, it's 1/3 the length of the marriage that you get that spousal maintenance. And once that's
Wait, say that again. In Kansas, it's 1/3 the length of the marriage.
Right. You were married 21 years, you're going to get spousal maintenance for 7 years. What if you're only married 9 years? And 3 years, you have to have a plan for how are you going to replace that income at that point in time, because spousal maintenance is there to essentially get you on your feet. It's to close the income gap. It's not meant to be your total income from then on. It's just for a period of time to get you on your feet. So you have to have a plan.
Okay, this is something that I've started to hear more often, and I cringe. I'm curious if you see this as an asset in your line of work, or if you also go, oh gosh, please don't do this. People trying to use ChatGPT to figure out a divorce. Is that helpful in your line of work for people to do that? Or you're like, oh dear, just call me?
These are better they call, because ChatGPT, it's pretty good and it's getting better.
It is.
But it's just pulling information off the internet. Well, what if it's pulled some misinformation? What if it's pulling information from another state and it doesn't apply to Kansas or Missouri? Then you're going down a path and it's not going to work, because that's not what the laws are here. So
I talked to an attorney recently and I asked him the same question. He was all fired up. He said, I gave my ChatGPT a very specific question from a very specific case law, and he said it spit back out a totally false case example. And he said that's really scary, because people make these decisions about their life and their family potentially based on completely false information, as opposed to saying, you know what, $11,000, $10,000, let's let professionals divide what we've worked our lifetime for.
Unfortunately, it's not cheap to get divorced, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world either. And I've seen cases where one party is just trying to run the other one out of money.
Sure.
And they've just drug the process on longer and longer and longer. Well, the worst one I ever saw was about 3 years. That's a long time.
Wow.
And in the end, she didn't really have anything left because it all went to attorney fees.
That's heartbreaking.
It was.
Okay. So a lot of people, it seems like, don't really want to try to involve a financial planner if they don't have a large sum, or they've just used everything that they had to get divorced. But in your experience and on your website even, you talk about the importance of having someone in your corner to help with that. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's your passion even?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually you need somebody to help you figure out what what do your finances look like going forward, whether that's just helping you with a budget or if it's having that plan so someday you can retire, because now maybe half the assets that you thought you'd have for retirement are now with your ex, and
Right.
you want to know what does that outlook look like? Are you still going to be able to retire on time? Are there other things that you wanted to do, like maybe go back to school and get another degree? Can you afford to do that, or how can you do that? Buying another house, that's a big one,
It is.
especially post-divorce. And that's something we can look at and say, okay, what do you need to do? Do you need to save money to be able to do that? Or do you have funds? Is there another way to get you into a house perhaps? And we try to be creative and come up with a good solution for everybody. But I think everybody needs a planner. Either if you don't have wealth yet, you want to have wealth eventually. And if you have a plan, you'll get there. It just takes time.
And if I'm embarrassed, I don't have much saved, and I'm like, Melissa, I'm scared to even show you what's behind the curtain here. What would you say to that?
One of my best clients started out, he was going through a medical bankruptcy. He had big medical bills. He talked to a bankruptcy attorney and she said, yep, this is the way to go. He didn't have other debt. He was good on his mortgage and everything else. It was just that he had medical debt that was pretty big. And so he went through that bankruptcy. Well, before she filed the bankruptcy, that attorney put him in touch with me and said, I think you can help him because he did have some assets that could be moved into retirement accounts, which are protected in bankruptcy, for example.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we got that established. Now it's been 5 or 6 years, but his whole financial picture has turned around from when we started. And that's always gratifying for me to see whenever people are successfully engaged in their planning process. We met last week and he was just like, yeah, everything just feels totally different than it used to. I said, you are financially secure. So he's enjoying retirement and he doesn't have any worries anymore. That's huge.
Huge. Financial insecurity makes people do really crazy things in divorce. And I get it, but if we can get people in front of you or any other divorce professionals that will sit down and really have educated discussions, it just makes everything else, all the other big emotions, feel a little smaller. If somebody wants to reach out to you, do you mind to tell them how they can get in touch with you?
So you can reach out. You can go to sapphiredivorcesolutions.com and send an email to me, melissa@sapphiredivorcesolutions.com.
Great. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. My name is Rebecca Green. I'm here with Melissa Ellis today, and we are going to answer all your questions about mediation in the state of Missouri and Kansas. Please keep in mind, if you found us somewhere else in the country, there may be some very different processes, and at the same time, hopefully you can learn something today. So thank you so much for being here, Melissa.
Absolutely.
You've got a long list of credentials. Share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure.
I'm going to dive in and pick your brain about everything today.
All right. I'm Melissa Ellis. I own Sapphire Divorce Solutions. I also own Sapphire Wealth Planning. So you'll find me on 2 different websites. I'm a certified financial planner. I have a master's in personal financial planning, and I'm also a certified divorce financial analyst. And that's really the reason why Rebecca reached out to me, was to talk about what happens when you get divorced.
Yeah, because your life's not over. I say that every single video I have a chance. It's not over. It's not the end. And yet this is a really hard part that you want as much information as you can get. So congratulations to you for doing your research and being willing to even watch the beginning of this video. My goal today, and we talked about it a little bit before, is just to dive in and help people take away a little bit of the fear about what's on the other side of mediation. So for somebody starting at the very beginning, can you explain what mediation in divorce is?
Okay. So mediation is really sitting down with someone that is neutral, the mediator, to help you work through whatever the issues are in your divorce, whether it's your parenting plan, if it's the finances, or really all of that. And we just start at the very beginning and just go through and work through step by step until we come up with a plan for your divorce. Then we can involve an attorney to write the documents, because I can't write the documents in the state. It has to be done by an attorney. But I have attorneys that will work with us also as a neutral. They're there to prepare documents that help you get divorced. At that point, we can say, if you want to go talk to an attorney, I have a list of attorneys to refer you to if you want them to look at it in your interest. That way you have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. But a lot of times when people go through a mediation process with me, because I'm working through all the finances with them, they know everything that went into that plan. I feel like I understand this because they're the ones that actually crafted it. It's not me telling them what they need to do. It's more of a process of them deciding what they would like to do. And if it makes financial sense, then we can move forward and we can make that happen.
I love that. So prior to a mediation with you, what type of documents would I be collecting to be able to have this meeting?
So you'd want to collect all the statements for bank accounts, credit card accounts, your 401k statements, most recent pay stubs, previous tax returns, the deed to your house, because that information will be needed. Even if one of you is going to keep the house, you still need a copy of the deed or the information from it. A list of what the important assets that you own, cars, if you own boats, if you own a vacation property, timeshare. What are other things that have come up? And sometimes just toys, ATVs and things like that, that people all of a sudden go, oh, well, what are we going to do with that?
Golf cart,
Yeah.
whatever.
Whatever it is, if it's important or you feel like it's of sentimental value, you want it addressed in the divorce, then we just need a list of that.
Okay, so I've hired you, we've collected all of our documents, and it's the day of mediation. When I walk in, what happens?
What I'll have prepared is a list of the assets and liabilities of the marriage. And so we just make sure that we've accounted for everything. And then we have a conversation. Have you already made a decision about the house? A lot of times they haven't. And they're like, can I afford to keep the house? Okay, we can look at that and we can figure that out if one or the other can afford it. A lot of times people have something in mind, what they think they would like to have happen.
Yes.
And a lot of times if they're not comfortable talking in front of each other, because sometimes they're not, we can actually separate and just have a one-to-one conversation and find out what is it that you want or need and find out what the other person wants or needs. And so a lot of times you look at what you want might not be what your spouse wants.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, good. This works out really well because you didn't want that anyway, and they did. So we figure that out and then just come up with what's an equitable settlement. And we try to then find, okay, what are the hard pieces? And then a lot of times though, once we get to the end, it just, and people are just like, oh, this is what we should do.
Right.
It's just obvious when you look at it on paper.
So one of the things that I think I experience is people find one item. There's one thing that's where they're going to dig their heels in, right? Mm-hmm. So I either want the house or I'm not giving him my retirement or whatever the case may be there. As someone who mediates these conversations, what's your advice to someone, let's say the person watching this video is a little more reasonable. They're doing the research and trying to find information. How do I go about that? Should I let the other person know I'm not budging on that, or do I leave it to the professional? How to navigate that situation?
You can actually do it either way.
Okay.
But a lot of times if you leave it to the professional, I can bring up that subject and knowing that it's a touchy subject and say it's a canoe. You both want the canoe. You know, kind of an odd object, but it could be anything. We'll look at that and go, okay, number one, how much time are we going to spend talking about this? And was it costing you to have this conversation? So that's the number one. And then what's the value of the object that we're talking about? Okay, what would it cost to go buy another one? Would there be an advantage? Is there a reason why this one is so important? And sometimes people then all of a sudden just realize, no, there's really not any reason for that one. I just want a canoe or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, maybe either you get a new one or it's like, fine, let's flip a coin. If it's really not of huge monetary value and it's just more of I just want it, then in the end it's like, okay, what's the real worth of it, and should we even spend time talking about it? It was a kayak, a couple of kayaks and some other things that were, water toys and stuff for their lake house. In the end, we're like, okay, what's all of that worth? And he said, more than what I'm paying you right now. Or no, less than what I'm paying you right now. So it's like, okay, well then the two of you are just going to figure that out. Because, yeah, I think so. I think we just figured it out.
Okay.
It was just not important. And it's just like, let's just put that aside because it's really not important. And sometimes that comes to light real quick. What's truly important, what isn't. Yeah.
And I know you've already touched on this a little bit, but sometimes in a divorce, it's scary to sit next to somebody who it got really bad with. So have you seen that a few times where you sit down in a room and because you're the neutral party, tensions do melt away a little bit?
I see that a lot. And I'm amazed at the number of times where I've seen the couple be very kind and gracious to the other one, sitting around this table and talking about how we're dividing up their marriage. And they're so kind. And I think, why are they getting divorced? They're so sweet to each other. But I think that's a good barometer for what their relationship will be like post-divorce.
Right.
Because when you get into talking about the money, the divorce, that's usually where the tension comes up. They might not be able to have that conversation at home together. They might be able to talk about, the place and silverware and everything else, but they can't really talk about the big stuff. But sitting here, they can have that conversation because it's a safe space.
Yes.
And that's really the key, as having that safe space. There's somebody else that's listening to the conversation or helping lead the conversation. And then it comes down to where there's like, no, I want you to be okay and I want to be okay. And then they can see where they're both financially going to be okay. Because a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to be living under a bridge on a cardboard box or some variation of that. And you're not going to have as much as what you have when you're together, but you will have enough to move forward. And that's the key.
Yes. And I know you yourself are not a therapist, but you work with and are professionally involved with lots of therapists. I always like to highlight how stressful this process can be for people, right? The loss and the grief. Mm-hmm. If somebody's watching this and they just feel like, man, a lot of things that are being said and thrown at my way, I think I should understand them, but I just don't. Is that normal?
Absolutely. Not everybody's going to understand everything. In fact, a lot of times there is one person in the marriage that has handled the finances and the other one just let them handle it because that was their thing and they handled other things. And so then when they get divorced, they're like, oh no. So a lot of times I can just sit down with them and just say, okay, this is what you have. This is what you owe. This is how this has all come about. And they're like, oh, okay. There's all of a sudden understand, or they can ask that question they think is a stupid question, but there is no stupid question. They don't know the difference between 401k and say their savings account. But I can help break that down and just make it very simple and tell them why they want some of both and how that's going to be advantageous down the road.
Right.
So, and there are some cases where I have advocated for one party, and a lot of times they've either are going through mediation with a different mediator, or maybe they are in a trial situation, or any other process that I'm not already involved in. A lot of times we can just sit down and go through, okay, this is what's being offered. And what does this look like for you going forward? Because they don't always get that information. They can see what it looks like today, but what will that look like 5 years down the road?
Okay, so explain that a little bit more, because I think people go, well, today we've got $300,000, you get 150, I get 150, we're good.
So well, number one, is there a need for spousal maintenance in that divorce? And a lot of times attorneys will just assume, well, you have a job, so you probably don't need spousal maintenance. But what they don't realize is the other spouse makes quite a bit more, and you won't be able to live the same level of lifestyle. If there are children involved, the state really wants you to have somewhat a level income type or same type of living situation. You don't want to have one in the trailer park and one in the mansion, right?
Right.
The kids are going to go, I don't want to go to the trailer park and see mom. Don't make me go where there's not an Xbox, whatever it is. Sure. And so they want to make it so that it's comfortable for everybody. So that's where a lot of times we need to look at spousal maintenance. Is it required or needed? It's never quite required, but is it truly needed? Child support's a whole other thing. Right. That is a requirement. Right. And the state's going to make sure kids are taken care of. But sometimes you need an advocate to step up and say, no, look, this person's earning power is not the same and never will be. Can we do something to correct that? Can we help you get a degree or some type of work that you'll be able to replace that income? If you've been staying at home taking care of the kids for a long time, you might not really even know what your skills are. And we can help uncover that. I have other professionals I've referred people to help them figure out what's a career that they could go into that they would enjoy.
Those are great resources. And that's something I always try to tell people is you're not alone in the process unless you choose to be. And it can be scary to write a check up front to help someone, especially, at least what I found in my world is it seems like the person who typically does the finances and has done the bookkeeping and bought the house, that person feels like they can kind of handle it. And a lot of times they don't even want to involve a financial planner or someone for the other spouse. But just to keep stereotypes alive, if the stay-at-home mom has someone like you sitting across the table from her and helping her feel more confident, a lot of times the dad that's been working for 15, 20 years ends up feeling better on the other side too. Right. Because everybody has a working knowledge of what this is going to shake out to be.
Yeah. And I have to say, in most cases, probably 99% of the cases, the person who wants that divorce, especially if they're the ones that are making more money, they want their spouse to be okay.
Yes.
And I've seen where they have offered more than what was really required to make the other person whole or comfortable. And they're like, I know I'm going to make more money, but they need this, or I want to pay for school, or I want to pay for something, or I want to buy them a new car because the car they've been driving is the one we've had for 10 years and mine's new. So there are things that they want to do to make sure that the other one is able to, live a comfortable lifestyle.
So one last question that I have for you. If you could wave a magic wand, where at in the divorce process do you think it's the most beneficial for people to talk with you?
The very beginning.
Okay.
The first thought when it crosses your mind, whether you think you're going to get a divorce or that you want to ask for that divorce, that's the time to sit down and go, okay, what does this look like? Am I going to be okay financially? And to have that knowledge up front.
Yes.
And also to know maybe some things that you need before you have the conversation. So you need the documents that we talked about, all the different statements, so that you know what it is that you have. You don't want to be surprised later and go, oh, I left the house and I didn't get, this past tax returns.
Right.
Then you have to dig for information. You don't want to do that. But if you know up front what that might look like, then it's not a big surprise when you sit down at the mediation table after you've told your spouse, I'm ready to get a divorce. If you don't know where you are financially, I did have one woman who sat here. It was one of those cases where she was in a different process and her attorney said, I think you can help her understand her finances. And so we sat down and looked at it, and they had a lot of income. They didn't have very much saved.
Wow.
And they were in their early 60s. And all of a sudden she realized, oh, we really don't have anything. They had a beautiful house, but it was leveraged, so there was debt against it. There wasn't a lot of liquid assets in the end.
Right.
And then she said to me, she goes, had I known this, I never would have asked for a divorce. And I'm like, oh dear. Wow. Maybe counseling would have been helpful,
right.
And can you go back and put that back in the box after you've already said, I want a divorce? No, it's hard to put that back in the box. Let's go to counseling now. That's the other thing I always ask people when they call and say, okay, I'm thinking about getting a divorce, or I think I'm headed that way. I'll ask them if they've gone to counseling. And if they haven't, I will give them referrals to some really good therapists that I know that might be able to fix the relationship, because there's no sense in going through a divorce that you don't really need if you can repair the relationship. And actually, I've had 8 couples that have decided over the years that we're not going to get a divorce after all. And they either became financial planning clients, but they didn't get a divorce.
That's incredible.
And a lot of it was they just didn't understand the finances. One of them didn't, and thought that something was occurring that wasn't occurring. And they either thought the spouse was hiding money. It's like, nope, it's all right here. It costs that much for us to live.
I mean, taking out any extramarital affairs or abuse with alcoholism or something like that, I think probably money's the biggest issue in a divorce and in a marriage. Yeah. You've got somebody in your corner that can really sit down and, as an educator, explain to everybody what the situation is.
Right.
It can make a huge difference in people's lives. So, if somebody needs to reach out to you either for mediation or financial planning, what does that look like?
They can go to either one of my websites, whether it's sapphiredivorcesolutions.com or sapphirewealthplanning.com. And there's a button at the top of the page that says schedule a consultation. The initial consultation is free, and we can do that by phone, Zoom, or in person.